All right. Hello, everyone. Hope you are all doing well. Welcome to the Asia Pacific Rail webinar series. My name is Bastian. I'm part of the Asia Pacific Rail team. Today's session is sponsored by Hexagon and will feature an exciting panel on cost and schedule performance, where we will be hearing insights from Hexagon, Light Rail Manila Corporation, and Jacobs. Before the panel, a few housekeeping notes. We would like you to submit your questions through the Q&A functionality in your Zoom interface. You can find it in the bottom. This way our panelists can view the questions and answer them later on. Secondly, the opinions shared by the panelists are their own views and might not represent the views of their respective companies. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our panel, Mr. Reynaldo Pangilinan from Light Rail Manila Corp, Mr. Julian Small from Jacobs, and our moderator for the session, Mr. James Crowell from Hexagon. I would like to ask our panelists to unmute their mics and then like to give the session to James.
Okay, thank you, Bastian. I will quickly introduce myself and ask the panelists to do the same. My name is James Crowell. I'm an industry consultant, helping companies in Asia Pacific evaluate their project management tools and processes in order to boost outcomes on their projects. Ray, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Reynaldo Pangilinan. You can call me Ray for short. I'm representing LRMC of the Philippines, Light Rail Manila Corporation. The company I represent is a special purpose vehicle company that was awarded the PPP concession for the extension of operation and maintenance of the existing line in Manila, extending the existing line south by 12 kilometers. Approximately. Thank you.
Julian, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Forgive me. My name's Julian Small. I'm the Executive Regional Market Director for rail across Asia Pacific for Jacobs. I'm originally from the UK, but left there a long time ago, and I currently live in Sydney in Australia. I've got about 30 years experience in the industry, and I've been lucky enough to have worked all over the world, including the UK, Hong Kong, Australia, New Zealand, and all over the Middle East. I had 12 years in the Middle East as well. I've had senior roles on Dubai Metro, Kuwait Metro, Doha Metro, Hong Kong Airport Express, KCRC West Rail, and also Sharting Central Link a long time ago, amongst others. And I'm very pleased to be here today with everybody and look forward to the seminar.
Okay, thank you both. I'm looking forward to discussing this topic with you today. Hexagon, we've partnered with Asia Pacific Rail to bring you the topic of cost and schedule performance when good is not good enough. And I'll be kicking off this discussion by, I'll kick off the discussion with just an overview, and then we will have the majority of the time will be spent with a panelist discussion with Ray and Julian. Introduction to Hexagon. Hexagon is a global leader in sensor, software, and autonomous solutions, committed to empowering an autonomous future. Our technology is used everywhere from 3D laser scanning Mount Blanc, Europe's tallest peak, to guiding the construction of One World Trade Center, the tallest building in the West. Volkswagen uses our technology to launch new vehicles and improve the production of existing models. If you're an iPhone user, you're already a customer of ours because the iPhone manufacturer is using our coordinate measuring machine to inspect and install electronic components in the iPhone. Leading project delivery companies are using our software and hardware to manage their projects from the ideation phase through project delivery, all the way through operations and maintenance. But today's topic, cost and schedule performance, when good is not good enough. I will be sharing with you the current challenges that the rail industry is facing, some of the trends that the industry is heading, talk about how we can improve upon project outcomes, and actually how we can measure that success through specific key performance indicators. Current challenges facing the rail industry, there's an increase in the size and complexity. This is being fueled by exponential growth within Asia Pacific as well as the entire world. Governance and compliance pressures are requiring that companies follow specific business processes and maintain the accuracy of their data. Companies have different point solutions in place, and decision-making is being based on incomplete. Funds need to be allocated to the right project to ensure that projects are getting the best return on investment. There's an aging workforce where the knowledge is evaporating, and we need to retain that knowledge so that we can expand upon it moving forward. Regulations are changing all the time, requiring rapid implementation. In the wake of COVID-19, we now have social distancing norms that need to be put in place throughout our projects, and that impacts our cost and schedule performance. Then there's newly emerging risks that are arising that need to be managed and mitigated along the way. So let's look at which direction the industry is heading. So first, we have an increase in urbanization. So people are flocking to cities, which is driving up the demand for rail projects. So rail projects are experiencing unprecedented growth in investment, especially when you look at Asia Pacific and in developing countries. There's a lot of investment going into infrastructure projects and rail in particular. However, these projects are not always delivering the planned financial returns that they set out at the beginning of the project. In fact, the larger the project, the more likely to have cost and schedule overruns. And there's a digital transformation that's sweeping through the industry that's changing norms that have been in place for many years. So companies are now implementing enterprise project performance systems to better manage their portfolio of projects. Even such, some of those companies have not taken it all the way by connecting that system to their accounting system, procurement system, or other solutions that they have in order to get real-time access into their information so that they can identify early warning indicators and take action early on to correct the course of any project. Gartner says that 80% of today's project management tasks will be eliminated by 2020. So what does that mean for our project team members? So it doesn't mean that they all lose their jobs. It means that their jobs are changing. So no longer do you have to look backwards at what has happened to the project and spend hours, days, or weeks collecting information to produce reports and charts, but technology is helping us to do that automatically so we can spend our time on the actual analysis of the data and making forecast adjustments and improving the predictability and boosting the outcomes on those projects. So what improvements will we see on our projects? So first, you will have improved decision-making. So by having an enterprise project performance system connected to all of your existing systems, you're going to remove the information silos and have better insight into the information that you already have available within your organization. You'll shift from a reactive mindset to a proactive mindset by using advanced forecasting capabilities and predictability metrics. You'll be able to improve upon your project outcomes. Better governance will be in place, so you'll be able to maintain all of the historical data and actually reuse that to the benefit of future projects. You'll have a system that's built on industry best practices, but is also flexible enough to accommodate each company's unique intricacies. You'll have visibility into project performance, so this is going to create more transparency on projects, improve the trust and relationships among all stakeholders involved. And then you'll have efficiency in your reporting. So you'll be able to work with consistent and accurate data across your projects, and that's going to facilitate quick and easier reporting. So the enterprise project performance lifecycle actually starts all the way from the ideation phase and business case analysis of a project through funding and through selecting the right project, funding that project, planning for the project, budgeting, managing changes, monitoring the performance and productivity, all the way through forecasting, and then closure of that project into operations and maintenance. Now, how do we measure success? We are going to achieve these things. We must be able to measure them. So there are specific key performance indicators that I would like to share with you. First is increased inefficiency. So this is something that can be measured and will be improved upon. You'll be able to reduce the time that it takes to perform certain tasks. You'll improve your report cycle times, reduce the number of revisions, for example. These are all things that can be measured and improve your efficiency. You'll be able to use your resources more efficiently across projects for a wider range of things because they will have common knowledge of the business processes and tools. It will improve the predictability of your projects. Predictability is a measure of what point along the project life cycle does the forecast become accurate. So by encouraging early forecast changes, you'll actually be able to take corrective action today and improve upon the outcome of that project. And then lastly, you will have greater control. So you will have standardized business processes that are followed and enforceable. It will be intuitive and easy to use. So you're going to reduce time it takes to respond to different information, improve upon the quality, and reduce the amount of rework. And the result is you will have actionable information. So no longer will you have to rely on a static chart placed in front of you, but it will be an interactive dashboard that you can actually click and drill down into the details until you get to the level of information that you require. Now, if you'd like to hear more about this, or if you want to see where your organization falls on the project performance maturity curve, we will be sharing with all registrants this project performance maturity assessment that you can take. It's a quick tool, allows you to answer a few questions and then find out immediately how your organization ranks on the project maturity curve and the steps that you can take to improve upon that. That will be available along with a copy of this presentation to all participants of this webinar. Now, I am going to shift gears and we're going to now engage with Ray and Julian in our panelist discussion. But we have received some questions prior to this webinar that I will be asking of our panelists. And if you have questions along the way about anything that I've discussed or anything that's mentioned by our panelists, feel free to enter them in the question and answer window within the conference. And I will be monitoring that and facilitating this discussion, and we'll try to answer as many questions today as we can. So with that, I would like to invite Ray and Julian to just share their initial thoughts, and I would like to hear their feedback on any of the challenges or the trends that I have mentioned, and if they've experienced these things or what they would like to share.
Start.
Go on, Ray, you go first.
I'll go ahead. Yeah, and just caught our attention, or my attention, on slide 6. One of the items there stating changing regulations requiring rapid implementation. I think it's maybe worth discussing or sharing because you see, some countries, or even mine, just my opinion, the approach and experiences may be different than others, just like ours. Managing the COVID-19 is more on a security and military threat than a health crisis. Emphasis is therefore on the regulation and enforcement. Very little is left to individual regulation, so the mindset is external regulation and enforcement. Therefore, for us to restart our operation, a significant burden of regulation and enforcement is shifted to us. For example, we will have to take the responsibility to regulate and enforce physical distancing through limiting platform and LRB loading, check for signs of sickness like temperature checks, obtain passes for all our personnel and travel to and from work through a lot of checkpoints. Our personnel will have to pass through checkpoints to get to and from work, as well as to undertake their daily tasks as they need to move around our system. All of this said, we are in uncharted territory. Government is putting up regulations and practices that are frankly made up as we go along. Case in point, it's urgent need for data for us to get the rapid pass application. Just a thought. Yeah? I hope it's worth sharing, I guess. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's right. So I was just going to jump in with my views on the slide deck. Well done, James. Really interesting presentation there, and really good to see the digital aspects are developing and what your company offers. I think it's all about basically getting things right. It's about making the right decisions based on accurate information and outcome predictability. It's about, I think project management, it's not just about accurately recording the car crash, it's about intervening to avoid the car crash and being informed by indicators that enable decision making on time. And this requires us to be nimble and agile and quickly adapting to new information, new data as it becomes available. In the current environment, that is extremely prevalent because we are in an unprecedented situation right now, and we are finding our feet as we go along. And it's important that we have that flexibility and that adaptability to shift our views of how things are going to unfold, and be open to just understand how things are developing. I think the digital applications and offerings that you were presenting there, James, are obviously becoming an increasingly important part of our industry. And it's interesting your views there about can't call it artificial intelligence, but the fact that these digital offerings are going to start to replace some of the roles that have traditionally been taken place by humans. But I think it means that we need to be able to use that data and use that information and apply it in the right way.
Yep, exactly. I'm not surprised at all that both of you brought up COVID-19 in your response. It's at the forefront of everyone's mind right now. One thing that I've experienced or that I've witnessed is that maybe some companies were not as prepared for this disruption in their office life as they could have been. For example, everyone has shifted to working from home. Have you had any negative impacts of this where maybe some information is not available to you, or do you believe that your companies have been structured where that information is readily available and you can adapt to this remote way of doing business? Because I've actually met with some companies that are being negatively impacted because some information is only available on paper in the office. So those types of things might be shifting going forward.
I think sorry, Ray, if I could jump in. I think from Jacob's perspective, and certainly across some of the other organisations I've been dealing with, I think most organisations are coping surprisingly well. I think when it started at Jacobs, I think our leadership team, we were obviously very concerned, like everybody, but the things that we thought and were expecting to be a problem haven't really materialised. You know, we were very concerned about how we're going to communicate with each other and how we're going to coordinate our services and in terms of delivering our services to clients. We were concerned about productivity. We thought productivity might drop because, you know, people aren't stimulated by being in the office with other staff members. We were worried about people's mental health because they're going to be isolated. And we introduced a lot of work was undertaken to introduce systems and processes and various digital applications through our internet to monitor those things, and we've actually dealt with it really well. And I think a lot of the other companies have also dealt with it well. I think the main challenges that we're facing, and I'm looking at this through a rail lens, of course, is that there's definitely some sectors that have been severely affected by COVID. You know, it feels like the private sector and the aviation sector in particular, there's been a noticeable drop of workload out of those areas, as you might expect. Luckily for us, that's not a huge part of our business across the Asia Pacific region. We're mainly focused on government-funded infrastructure projects, which appear to be largely unaffected. In fact, if anything, it feels like we're a little bit busier than usual, certainly in the Australian side of the business. I think this obviously, some of these comments are from a more broader perspective, but I think that there's a bit of concern about the fact that there's less people using public transport now, and obviously airports as well, and that's it's how that unfolds post-COVID is obviously a concern. The feeling is that there is going to be a bit of a reluctance for people to return to those public transport means, because you're obviously thrust in an environment where you're close to other individuals, which isn't what's going to be wanted after that. And it's how that's going to affect rail. What's going to be the new norm? It's a particular concern. Whether that's going to be a short-lived thing or whether that's going to last longer is the main question. But my personal view is that it's probably going to be short-lived, and I hope that it doesn't feature too greatly in some of these business cases that have been looked at for the rail projects. But yeah, it's something that we need to monitor, and as I said earlier, you know, we need to be agile and flexible to adapt our businesses to however things unfold in this unprecedented situation.
Yep, thank you. Ray, what about you? Can you share your thoughts? How have you been impacted? How have you heard any any stories of companies that have been adversely impacted because maybe they haven't gone down this digital transformation journey and they're struggling a bit, or how have you adapted? You've got to unmute yourself.
Our ECQ started, or the lockdown started on March 17. So basically we're almost 2 months now. Mm. It was hard, it was difficult from the very start. We have all the means, working from home, not quite different compared working in the office, but sure, not all people are adaptable on that. But in time, they adapted on that. The only struggle, I think, personally, I can say, other companies that you are dealing with, this comes the problem. People doesn't have, or other companies doesn't have this communication tool and everything. Some people get Zoom, others not. Some have MS Team, some even use the Bible and everything. So it's quite difficult, but I think in a short period of time, like Julian said, it will come, it will adapt. Because like I said a while ago, it's more on we're changing, we're adapting when it happened, you know, it's a sort of, how you call it, getting your solution when you get the problem. Yeah. So I think it's in a short time, it will soon come to a same platform. I think all the people getting this experience in COVID-19 lockdown.
Yep, I've noticed that as well. I think the communication between external parties is always the wild card there. Okay, good. So I've got some questions that have been submitted. So let's go through the list here. So from now, the subject for today is on cost and schedule performance. So what do you, Julian or Ray, what do you view as the biggest challenge today that either your company faces or the industry in general faces in delivering projects on time and within budget? What do you think the biggest challenge is?
Well, I can go again. Go first.
Sure.
Yeah, I have 3 in mind. It's just my personal things and everything, but I think it will be the same with others. I don't know. One is predicting the future, of course. Our project is within the city, Metro Manila. It's when we say Metro Manila is composed of cities within the metro, yeah, metropolis. Enhanced community quarantine until at least May 15, that's within the week, is enforced. ECQ has effectively fully stopped all construction and installation works for our project, which is the Cavite extension. That's the 12-kilometer extending south, the existing line 1 that we operate, yeah, as a concessionaire. At present, we are not certain what will replace ECQ, but we are certain it will not be back to normal, that's for sure. Like many in the construction industry, we and our EPC contractor are currently considering how to operationalize routine construction processes while respecting physical distancing rules, as recommended by the World Health Organization. Moreover, we're having major problems trying to stop this when both local and international supply chains for equipment and materials will be restored. A very good example is that we just started our project last year, 3rd quarter of last year. And now most likely we're on the full swing, that is September, we're on full swing for foundations. Now you can do all the borings because it's all board pile and everything, but you don't have the cement and steel. That's one issue. Yep. And yeah, the second challenge is resources. There is a significant demand for worldwide qualified transit construction personnel suitable for the design and construction light rail transit system. This demand is particularly significant in the Philippines. Retaining personnel in the face of the uncertainties of challenge 1, which is predicting the future, is a significant management and financial challenges. A very good example also of this one is when we had our quarantine starting March of 17, we have also our whole week on the Christian world, yeah? The first week of April. So starting of March 17, people, foreigners, and the locals are given 72 hours to get out of Metro Manila. How will they come back now? Likewise, our foreign or expats from our EPCs and everything, they're also locked down outside the country. The third challenge is financial. Further to first challenge, which is predicting the future, our company, LRMC, does not have any clarity regarding the resumption of the light rail transit line 1, our concession part, and how our ridership will respond. We estimate that the physical distancing and other government requirements could initially reduce the ridership to 15%, which is way below our operational cost, yeah, of the pre-pandemic ridership, and we are unable to estimate when the ridership will recover. The reduction in the ridership will result in a significant loss of revenue, that's obvious, which significantly affects all the LRMC finances. The loss of revenue puts pressure on the entire organization and makes for a challenging relationship with our project finance lenders, who of course want certainty when construction will be completed.
Yes, good. Those are great. I'm in full agreement of those. So the predictability, the resource, skill availability, and the financial impact of especially COVID-19. Those are good examples. Julian, would you like to share any response?
Yeah. Well, just to comment on Ray's last point there. I was just reading an article this morning about again, this is focusing on railways, the impact of social distancing on public transport and railways, and just to physically get the social distancing that you need by reconfiguring the way that those train carriages are orientated, means that they can only fit between 10 to 15% of the passengers on the railway that you could normally. So this presents all sorts of other operational issues while that social distancing need is in place, which further impacts on revenue, and certainly impacts on the way that those railways are operating as well. In terms of, you asked the question about projects. So I think, again, I'm on this theme of being adaptable and flexible in these unprecedented times. But I think for projects, we should really, I suppose, be considering rebaselining those ongoing projects in terms of cost and program, taking cognizance of the new working environment that they're being delivered under. I know this is difficult because there's no real precedent. So we basically have to inform that through monitoring and learning as we go, and keeping that flexible kind of approach and open-mindedness to what that data, what that information means, and applying a large dosage of common sense. Of course, we've got to revert back to kind of first principles on how we approach all of that. In terms of monitoring contractors, I'm talking here, I suppose, as a consultant, more from a client's perspective, I suppose. But I suppose monitoring the contractors' performance on projects is going to continue as it did pre-COVID, of course. But the issue is how we evaluate the contractors' entitlement under this new working environment, and this has generated a huge amount of discussion in the industry. Again, I think common sense needs to be applied. There's no doubt that there are conditions imposed on the contractors which isn't their fault, obviously, and there needs to be a common sense approach to that. So I think, in short, as with most things, when you're experiencing something for the first time, you have to work up from first principles and base decisions on what's fair and reasonable, informed by the most up-to-minute data and information that you can get, using the reporting mechanisms that you were presenting, James. Is really what it's all about.
Good, thank you both for that. Okay, so we had some questions come in before. We've got some questions coming in now. To the attendees, you can keep submitting questions through the Q&A button on your screen, and we'll try to answer as many as we can here. I've got one here for me actually, and this is, can you share how Hexagon has enabled railway operators to mitigate their investment risk? And actually, the first thing that comes to mind is what you both mentioned, is that now you have to, now the feasibility of projects is in question because of the reduced capacity that you might have to deal with. So that could be a factor that goes into place when you're selecting future projects. So when you're comparing investment decisions, you know, being able to look at all of these factors together, you might go down a different approach, knowing how the world has been impacted by COVID-19 now. So things like that could give you, you know, more basically more profitability on going forward with a project, getting more return on a project that might be able to, you can manage capacity in a different way, or it can handle more. Just some ideas there. But so I asked about the challenges that you were seeing, and you shared some good ones. I want to ask about any best practices or anything that your companies have done that have helped you improve your cost and schedule performance. So I'm curious if either of you are, what kind of tools you're using or processes that you have, or any other thoughts that you may have in that area.
I think, sorry, Ray, I'll jump in again. Look, best practices haven't changed. It's about getting a clear baseline of unambiguous parameters. It's about setting the project on the right course right from the beginning, and making sure that you're answering the right question, and you're challenging the questions that are being raised and the objectives that are being raised to make sure that you're heading down the right path right from the outset. A robust and sensible approach to estimating and schedules, looking at contingency, risk allocations, looking at benchmarking. That's particularly crucial right now, because benchmarking is shifting into this current environment. And consistency and commonality of data, a single source of the truth, and common platform for developing those costs and schedules, and having the best information and most current information that you can to help inform good decision making and timely decision making. Digital platforms appear through all of that. It's becoming more and more prevalent in our industry, and it's going to continue to be so, and that's going to continue. I think in terms of project, you mentioned earlier about looking at the viability of projects. Again, I think you really have to take a long-term view on these projects. It's not, the COVID it's uncomfortable, and it's difficult, and it's uncertain, but we're going to come through this. It's not going to last forever, and I suspect if you take a long-term view, COVID is probably not going to have a massive impact on the viability of projects in terms of their appraisals on a business case.
Good. Ray, anything to add?
Well, on our side, LRMC, we have appointed an EPC contractor to design. It's a foreign company, to design and build our extension. With them, they have subcontracted to a well-known, recognized international designer, having these best practices when it comes to designing architectural, structural, and engineering processes. The EPC contractor is therefore using all the design and build project management best practices. including but not limited to building information management, systems in the design of the viaduct, and the same with the stations. These systems are also being used to assess the construction activities, and especially the sequencing of work, which we do it locally, yeah? Reducing risk, increasing quality, ensuring best practices in health, safety, and environmental procedures, and reducing costs as well. That's what we do.
Good. Okay. Thank you. So let's get back to the questions here. Question was submitted just now. How do you see the global supply chain disruption having impacted the project life cycle? Ray, Julian, any comments there?
Yeah, well, it's an important point. There's no doubt that because of the COVID situation, I think has a big impact on the supply chain in terms of the sub-consultants, subcontractors that are working on the project, supporting the contractors delivering the works, and importantly, the availability of materials as well, that aspect of the supply chain. There's been issues with materials coming into countries from offshore, which is an issue. It's becoming an increasing issue on some of the construction sites that I'm aware of in Australia, at least. And there's no doubt this is going to impact. I think the issue is really to monitor and see just how big an impact that is having. I think it's a difficult one to evaluate, but it's something that is definitely happening, and it's something that needs to be looked at as a real impact on the progress and the cost of our projects.
Okay. Another question submitted. Usually civil works have overruns in budget and time due to poor quality of the project, because when you dig, you cannot know for certain what you will find. So how can we improve upon this? Any thoughts there from my side, from a system standpoint? You have to include these things as part of your risk management strategy, that you may find something that you were not expecting. I think the most important thing is to make the issue well known as soon as possible, so that you can take whatever corrective action is necessary. So it may be after you would have liked to know about this, the state of the civil works, but if you're able to just, 1 week, 1 month, a couple months, if you're able to just bring that information forward and get it reported up the chain as quickly as possible, then you have a better chance of taking that corrective action. But Ray, Julian, do you have any other thoughts you can add here? How can we improve upon these surprises that we might find at site?
In our case, our EPC is a lump sum turnkey project, and it's all based on a milestone payment. I don't see anything that can save on something like that. Yeah, scheme. The only thing I think when it comes to such as this lockdown, ECQs and everything that may affect is mainly the operational cost, the daily and everything, yeah, which we call it linear cost. I think that's the one that will pop up soon.
I think saying usually civil works overrun due to poor quality is a bit of a strong statement. I think projects usually overrun in terms of budget for lots of other reasons. Yeah, I mean, how can it be? How can you improve on this? It's about having the best monitoring and information gathering that you can get from the project through whichever mechanisms you can, and conveying that information rapidly to the decision makers so that an intervention can be made as soon as possible. I think for just using a project example from my background, I was the project manager of the Dubai Metro Red Line in the UAE for 4 or 5 years on the client side, and we had an issue at the start of the project where an element of it's actually the design was quite a long way behind where it should have been, and we took the action to replace that design consultant quite rapidly. It was something that could have taken months to discuss with the incumbent and go backwards and forwards, and we did try that for a period, but it reaches a point where you're just going to make a decision in order to allow the project to get back on track. So I think it's also timely decision making is important, and that decision making needs to be informed with the best data and best information you can to get things back on track.
Okay. Next question. Most of the projects are modeled on ridership models that were forecasted well beyond 2025. How do we mitigate this risk? So I think what the question is asking is I think you need to relook. I think projects were given the green light, in the past year or 2 years, and they were forecasting, a different ridership model than we would be forecasting today for this year and next year. So, can you share any thoughts about how we mitigate this risk?
Again, I think it's short-lived. I personally think it's short-lived. It's a year, maybe 18 months. I think we'll start to emerge from this situation, and I think ridership's going to return to levels that we saw pre-COVID. I mean, don't forget these projects that we're talking about, these big railway projects. They're not in place just for a short period. They're in place for 50, 100 years, right? So you're designing them for the future, and people are still going to travel. Things are going to come back to normal within a relatively short period. If you look at the life cycle of these projects, you look over a 100-year period. We're talking about a year or so. It's a small blip, So I'd encourage governments to continue to push forward with these projects, because it's and not panic. Obviously, we need to monitor how things are progressing, but I personally don't think there should be a huge impact on the viability of projects because of COVID.
Yeah. Yep. Ray, anything to add?
Same.
Yep. Sorry, what was that, Ray?
Nothing to add on that. I agree.
Yeah,
I think you agreed with me.
Yeah, so you also think it's going to be short-lived, and when you're looking at the long-term investment, it doesn't factor in too much. Yeah.
Should be back to normal.
I think what perhaps should be modelled is the cost of finance, and that might be a longer-term consideration. As we emerge out of COVID, we're hearing and reading all these articles from the various governments around the world who are declaring that they're going to bring out stimulus packages to try and drive growth in the various economies and to recover. And then a lot of that investment is directed towards transport infrastructure and in particular railways. I think what we're going to be facing is the entire globe. This is one thing that's different about this crisis than previous crises, that we've had over the previous history, this is a global issue, and there's going to be an excessive amount of global borrowing of funds on a scale that's never been seen before, to keep the economies going. The question there is going to be, the availability of those funds and how much it's going to cost to get that finance and direct it to those projects. I see that as being probably more of a critical discussion point than ridership.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing as well. And I think that the funding is going to be, you need to properly manage and allocate that, and yeah, it's going to be important moving forward. I also share your hopes about that this will be short-lived. I think that what will change are some of the processes that we might have taken for granted in the past. One example I can think of is maybe more projects will go into a zero-based budgeting approach, where you don't start with a budget from a similar project in the past, and that's your budget moving forward, but maybe on a zero-based budget where every expense has to be justified in order to build up that that budget. That might be something that companies are looking into today. Another question was just submitted moments ago. What is your feedback on alliance schemes where the owners and contractors are working together in order to get a cost and schedule improvement? So how can this be applied in Asia in particular, if there's any differences there? So any kind of do you think that there's any kind of synergies or risks, or any opportunities that you're seeing with kind of a close working relationship between the owner and the contractor, and less of a dividing line between the two?
Yeah, I'll go ahead, Julian. Well, in our case, like I said a while ago, we have a foreign contractor. It's a joint, or EPCC, we call it. It's a consortium of 2 foreign contractors. And so far, when we started the project, I think the collaboration and the trust is there, in a sense that prior to this pandemic, pre-pandemic, I can say, or now ECQ, we're still doing the work full swing, basically focusing on things that we can do within this ECQ regime, mainly design. It did not stop. Our design is basically based on many countries. Like, for example, in Korea, some of the design works are there, MEP in India, something like that, civil here. And we are productive in a way when it comes to the design, in the sense that also the government is giving us this pass, like what I was saying a while ago. We call it it's a pass under the ECQ regime, under the monitoring and jurisdiction of what we call IATF, Interagency Task Force. So they gave us ideas for some work that we can do, like, for example, assembling our precast yard when it comes to our robotics, because basically this project was studied on the adaptation of something considering the conditions, or whatever the conditions we have on ground, not enhancing traffic as well. So we're doing it by a launcher. Then we had 3 robotics on that. We have this transporter, we have this straddler, we have this launcher and everything. We're still doing the assembly of this, and these are big equipments. The second one is ask to them we're doing the best we could, tapping the services of the government, of course, being our partners. This is, we call it grantors, giving us the leverage in a way that our shipments should be released from customs as normal, not like under a secure regime that it's stuck up all there, but we cannot do anything about it. In fact, every week we are receiving 2 to 4 containers, which is good. That's why the works at site, basically assembly and everything of our robotics are ongoing. The only thing that stopped is the civil works. That's why I think the collaboration is good. It's something that mine is something to do with progress for them to get it paid because it's all on milestone payment. Yeah, so it all started from there.
Okay, good.
Look, I think obviously being based in Australia, a few years ago, there was a lot of alliance contracts over here. And then it kind of fell out of favour, and now there's a bit of a resurgence. There seems to be alliance models cropping up more frequently. I think if you ask people in our industry in Australia, you'll get a mixed response. Some people will be for it, some people would have had bad experiences. But there's no doubt that it's I think it's emerging again and also being adopted in other parts of the world. I think, and this plays to my previous point, I think what we're going to start to see is new and innovative contracting mechanisms or delivery mechanisms in response to funding of projects. I think we're going to start to see pressure on the industry to think of innovative ways of enabling projects to move forward with different financing mechanisms. We're going to see a lot more PPPs, a lot more private finance in projects. Certainly that's what we've seen in the past off the back of previous crises that have happened in different parts of the world. And I don't see this one being any different. And I think that's probably the main way of projects moving forward and dealing with the cost and schedule issue. But again, that raises another uncertainty on how the borrowing of money is going to influence lending rates. So it solves the issue, the immediate issue of lack of liquidity. I'm assuming there's going to be a lack of liquidity because of all the borrowing, but it pushes the spending much longer than you would if you were just funding it directly from the government. So I think, yes, alliance, yes, there are lots of benefits with alliances, but I think we're going to see lots of different mechanisms coming into play for delivery of projects, which have a strong component of finance to them as well.
Okay, good. And look at that, we have just reached the end of our time here. So I want to thank you both for taking the time to participate in this panelist discussion. Thank you to the attendees for listening in, submitting questions. We will share all of this information, the presentation, the maturity assessment, a copy of this recording with all of the attendees. And then I'll just turn it over to Bastien if he has any other closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you, James. Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Ray. Very interesting discussion, and thank you so much for the insights. Hopefully the audience will have a better grasp on the challenges that everybody's facing in their projects, and hopefully the industry after COVID-19, as you all mentioned, things will pick back up and hopefully become back to normal. If you have any, for the audience, if there's any questions, please feel free to reach out to the panelists directly. They are on LinkedIn. James, as James mentioned, Hexagon will have a feedback form after this session. If you are interested to learn more about their solutions, you can get in touch with him directly. And with that said, thanks again for all the insights. Now for next week's session, we do not have a webinar running as we are preparing for our 24-hour Global Rail virtual event. It's the first time that we're organizing this. It will take place on June 25th. So keep an eye out for more information on that, or get in touch with me directly if you'd like to know more about that. With that said, thanks again to all the panelists and especially to Hexagon for sponsoring the session. Everybody have a nice evening ahead, and stay safe, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.